Welcome to the Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast, where our goal is to help you increase your reputation as a leader, increase your ability to influence others, and increase your ability to fully engage your team to deliver remarkable results. Hi, I'm Perry Holly, a Maxwell Leadership Facilitator and Coach.
And I'm Chris Cody, Executive Vice President with Maxwell Leadership. Welcome and thank you for joining. As we get started today, I'd love for you to visit maxwellleadership.com/podcast. There you can leave a question that you have for us that we can unpack on a future podcast. Maybe you have a comment around leadership, a thought. We would love to hear that.
Suggested topics.
Suggested topics. That helps Perry out as he creates all this awesome content for us. Maybe you're looking for some virtual training with your team, which we are doing a lot of. It's doing a lot of in-person, but we're also doing a lot of virtual training and coaching, so you can leave your name and company information there, and we'd love to connect with you in regards to that. Well, today's topic, I was intrigued by this, and we talked a little bit about it during the break, and I think this is something that is more relevant than what we probably think and admit, and that is finding time for leadership. We all talk about not even having enough time in our calendar to do anything, and now we are looking at this of saying, how do we find time? Can we? We're going to unpack this a little bit today. To me, it's really about the availability for your team at the end of the day, and I think that's important as you work on a team. So, Perry, what drove this topic, this thought that we're going to be bringing to our listeners today?
Yes. I was on a group coaching call. So we do this a lot. We may deliver a workshop, and then we group coach the executives, 8 or 10 that were in the room. So it's a couple months out from the facilitation, and I always start the coaching call by saying, what's new in your leadership? What's going on in your leadership? What have you done since the last time we spoke? We made some decisions, and what have you done with that? Give me an update. And the head person on the call kind of rubs their head and goes, man, it has been so busy. We have been heads down so busy, I haven't had time to lead. My head just about exploded, but I held it together. I go, what? And I did use it as a coaching moment to say, listen, you are always leading, either poorly or greatly. Whatever people are watching, you don't get a break from this. And it got me to wondering, what exactly gets dropped when you're too busy in your mind, too busy to lead? Yeah. And I wondered if you ever faced this. Yeah. You're a busy dude. I was wondering, I don't see this in you. I feel like you're leading and being busy, but how does this relate to you?
So 100% do I struggle with this, right? Like we can become a slave to our calendars, which seems to be happening certain times in my leadership. And when you asked that question, what came to my mind was, am I a doer or a developer? And I think we've talked a little bit about this maybe in the past, but it's where it came back from. I don't know if we were with the client and we had this conversation or the content, and I was like, am I just focused on being a doer, or am I focused on being a developer? And when you put it in that lens, you go, if that's the case and I want to be a developer, I have to be a doer, but it's got to be in and through and with my people.
That's right.
Which is called leadership, which is called influence. And so, man, I 100% can resonate with that, but it's not an excuse. And I think what was frustrating you about the experience you had was, well, first of all, we're in the leadership business, and so we're like, But I think what's frustrating was like, that's on you. Like we have to be intentional about that if we want to develop people. And you and I believe that's the leader's greatest return that we could ever do, is to develop people, then to go and succeed as a leader. And so it is a real challenge. There's 100% an I deal with it, but you got to fight it every single day.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I fight the same battle, and it, to me, often comes down to, and we teach this in the 5 levels class. We ask, what's the difference between management and leadership? And we can go through, back and forth about what that is. But what I felt like this group was doing, and what you and I confess that we've struggled with, I spend all my time managing and not actually leading. So I'm managing the process and the business and not really leading the people. But today I wanted to review, a certain number of things. You figure out what the number is, of ideas about how you can move to making time for your leadership. But I'll tell you, just if you turn the podcast off now, here's what I want you to know. You're not adding leadership is not adding new things to your calendar. And what my saying I've always, as I've been learning about this, was stop trying to add leadership to your calendar as like it's something new, but take what's on your calendar, make leadership moments of the things that are already on your calendar.
Brilliant.
So stop adding leadership as a separate entry into your calendar, but add leadership moments to the things that are on your calendar.
That's brilliant. Like, you can turn the podcast off right now. That is a Twitter moment, hashtag Perry Holly quote. But you shared that with me right before we went live on this podcast, and I was like, ooh, that statement is really, really, really deep. That's good.
Well, and just the example we were just giving, that if you have things on your calendar, like I was telling Chris, if he's going to go down the hall to meet with our CEO, Mark Cole, and they're going to have a meeting that's scheduled about a 90-minute meeting on the 2024-2025 strategy, and he looks back around and he looks at a couple of his key players that are in their offices there, and he says, hey, I've got this meeting coming up this afternoon. I'd like for you to join me in that, and I don't want you to talk, sit up against the wall, take notes, whatever. But we'll debrief it later. But I want you to see, get a feel for how leadership works around here, how we plan, how we strategize. I want you to get a feel for how Mark works, how I work. And what you're doing there is you had an event on your calendar, a 90-minute call, and now you just made it a leadership moment by a leadership development moment or a strategy development. You gave there's a lot of benefit in doing that. Now, you can't invite everybody to every meeting.
Right.
There's a lot of meetings that are private. You can't do that. But I'm just finding that I had a leader that did this once, and it really struck me odd that he didn't miss everything on his calendar. He kind of looked at even lunch sometimes. He said, hey, come join me for lunch. I want to talk about your career. Okay, that's a leadership moment. It's a development moment, and so I think there's lots there. And I put down, Liz said, what are the things that could be dropped? What are the actions of leaders? So, vision and strategy, communicating, inspiring, making decisions, delegating, building relationships, coaching, mentoring, leading by example, monitoring, evaluating performance, handling challenges, continuous learning. There's all kinds of things. There's way more than this 12 that are on this list. But what do you think gets dropped when you don't have time for leadership?
Well, I'm a little concerned because I was excited about we might have the number 5 in this lesson, but you started off with 12 points. I'm not sure where you're going with this, but
I just was trying to mess with you.
You might have to listen to see if 5 shows up. But I think it's interesting. I do think this is a list of 12. I think, to your point, there's probably just a whole slew of other things that, as actions of leaders, that we need to make sure that we're thinking about. If this list that you just talked about here, if you said to me, hey, what's the one that if we dropped or, would kind of maybe mess everything up? And it goes back to something that every single leader talks to us about when they're on the phone. And I think I know I experience, and I know you experience, and that is communication. If a leader cannot communicate, then, what good is the vision? What good is the relationships, the expectations? There's all kinds of gaps inside there. And so for me, I think the word communicating of this list of 12, I think that impacts every single other one as a leader that we need to make sure that we're focused on.
So I do have 5 strategies.
There it is. There it is. Yes.
For this, but I want to make these practical. But let me tell you, the overall big learning I already gave you was make moments of the things already on your calendar. Don't miss that. But here's some practical ideas, and I'm going to throw them at you one at a time. We'll move quickly, but they may sound insignificant, but I think for me they have been meaningful. Number 1 was the practice of calendar blocking. Are you leaving your calendar wide open, or do you block it for important things? Why are you shaming your head down?
Because I feel like I think I believe in that principle as a concept, and then I thought, and then protect it.
Oh yeah,
right? Because for me,
blocking's the easy part.
I have good intentions. I'll put blocks all over my calendar, right?
Did they vanish?
But then all of a sudden I'm like, well, Perry needs, we need to connect. Yeah, then I need to Jake, whatever, and all of a sudden I'm like, well, I mean, it was on there Sunday night. I don't know what happened, And so my thought was, man, to do that and protect it. I think you've got to be so intentional about this and communicate it to your team as well, and just say, hey, I had the opportunity one time to have lunch with a former Chick-fil-A executive, and he was probably one of the first 10 Chick-fil-A employees and kind of helped build what it was, ran marketing departments. And so I said, hey, what was one of the keys to your career that you felt like you allowed you to think on the business, be in the business and all that stuff? And he goes, oh, it's pretty simple. So I pull out my pen. I'm like, give it to me. He's like, Friday from 12 to 5, I blocked out my calendar and would not have a meeting, would not whatever. He said that was my time to reflect on the business from that week. What are we thinking about for the next week? It allowed me to spend some time, really doing what I needed to do before I got to the weekend. Sometimes I had to work on the weekends or whatever, but then I was able to be present with my family on that. And so I thought, man, there's a guy that led at a very, very high level for a long time. And every Friday from 12 to 5, he didn't have a meeting, didn't have a call, but it was on the business. And he said that's probably the best thing he had done for his career
really
at Chick-fil-A as an executive. So, man, practice that calendar blocking like Perry's talking about, and then protect it. Yeah, that's my ad. Protect it.
I like that.
Yeah.
Number 2 was, and I think it helps with the blocking, is be very clear about your priorities. That to me was there's a lot of things competing for your time, and your people, your leadership, your business, all those types of things. But what's your decision-making filter for that? It is your priorities, and the ability to say no, which you and I both struggle with, is impeded by a lack of being clear on what it is we're trying to do.
Yeah, I love this because I think if you have too many things on there, you're not able to strategically allocate, your calendar and your time for leading and developing people. And as you come up with that list of priorities, as you talked about in decision-making filter, my first comment is review it often. I just spent, a couple weeks ago, a day away and was just, some of the changes that we have in the organization and responsibilities and shifts. And so I blocked out the entire day and I got away and I just said, okay, what are my priorities? And then how do I communicate that to the team so that they're aware of that? And as I went through that, I noticed, man, I'm glad I'm reviewing this because of my priorities, because they're drastically different than what they were 2 months ago, 3 months ago. And so one of the things in developing this strategy to set my calendar up is to be able to do that and make sure that maybe some things that are not as high of a priority don't make it on the calendar, which again then goes back to, as a leader, being able to find time for the people. So yeah, I think that's key. But my add to you there is to review it on a timely manner because it's going to change. It's going to change.
I have a process every evening before I close down for the day. I use a 3x5 index card to capture my 3 most important things for tomorrow. Looking at whatever's changed. I had a plan for the week, but where are we? What's changing? What do I need to be working on? And I start early, so I want to know. I don't want to be sitting at my kitchen counter, waiting on the coffee to brew, wondering what am I going to be doing after I have my morning routine. What is the first thing I'm going to be doing? I know the most important things first, and then I reassess that at the end of the day for tomorrow. And I'm carrying that card with me right now. I know what's got coming up.
Leaders, you know better than anyone that growth is essential if you want to make tomorrow better than today. But fitting growth into your calendar takes intentionality and self-discipline. So let Maxwell Leadership help make your growth achievable. You're invited to join thousands of worldwide leaders in using the Maxwell Leadership Growth Plan. The Maxwell Leadership Growth Plan provides you with convenient and easy to implement leadership resources, including video lessons from John Maxwell, all at your fingertips. Available in our Maxwell Leadership app or online, you'll be coached by many well-known leadership experts that will help you achieve your growth goals. You can even listen to this podcast right there in the app. Check it out for free today at growth.maxwellleadership.com. That's growth.maxwellleadership.com.
Number 3 says, this one's huge. So scheduling one-on-one meetings with the people on your team. I am stunned by the number of leaders in our coaching practice that either when I say this, think it's a new idea or, yeah, I used to, but I don't anymore. To me, this is fundamental to at least having that everybody on your team knows they have time with you each week or each 2 weeks that they have dedicated time with you. I see your head dropping again.
I'm with you. I can't believe how many men and women that are leading people that don't have regular one-on-ones. It doesn't have to be every week, and it doesn't have to be an hour and a half long. It simply could be that it's every other week, it's 30 minutes, it's the agenda about them. How in the world can you lead an organization or a team that the direction you want it to go in if you're not having, regular one-on-ones? I was working with a close friend of mine who has a small organization that he's building, and the structure of his leadership team grew faster than what the organization grew. And as we saw the organization growing, he came to me and he's like, I feel like we're a little off target. We're a little off. And I was like, well, how often are you meeting with your key leaders? He goes, I leave that to my general manager. What? I'm like, wait a minute. We're not running a $100 billion business where you have different tiers of leadership. Like, you got to be having one-on-ones. And so I think even if you bring that down to a very small team, they will capture your heart, the vision, the strategy, if you're having these. And so I don't know how people can go about not having this at least twice a month with their team.
Yeah, I won't go back to the 12 that I listed things on leadership, but a lot of the 12 can be compensated in that 30-minute one-on-one where you let people know you see them, you know them, you listen to them. It's just fantastic. And
I know the last thing you're looking for is to attend another meeting. I know how you feel about meetings. But, I mean, you have to have these. These are critical.
That one I like because it helps me stay connected.
Yeah.
Don't get into me in meetings.
Yeah.
Number 4, John would call it walk slowly among the people. I'm old enough to know that it was called practice MBWA, management by walking around. But I don't have time to walk around, I hear you saying. Find creative ways to get out and walk through the office, walk through the plant. What if your team is remote? How do you walk among the team when it's remote? Might be scheduling those one-on-ones, might be catching a few minutes of how you're doing. What are your thoughts on MBWA?
So one of the things I started doing was I realized that in my calendar, as we were kind of blocking out meetings, that they were every hour on the hour and they were an hour long. And I realized I would come into the office and before I know it, it was the end of the day and I'm leaving and I didn't see anybody on my team or in the organization. And so I have shortened my meetings to 30 or 45 minutes, still try to keep them on the hour. So that allows me, if I then have a break and I'm walking to another office, whatever, I know I have a little bit of time to pop my head in an office and be like, hey, what's going on? And
that's really good.
And whatever. But so again, back to one of your points earlier, I'm not calendaring it. Right. It's on my calendar, and so I'm leading through it, knowing that I've got some opportunity to touch base with that. Now, I think you pose a really good question here, which is, how do you do this with remote teams? Mm-hmm. And I've heard people with some creative solutions around, Zoom meetings, and they just pop in. Some are not business, some are. I know one executive that will say, hey, I have open door policy from 2 to 4 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And what she does is she sits at her home office while she's working, but keeps Zoom up, and people can pop in there and just check in. Like it's something that, so you got to get creative. But man, I think this is huge to being a developer of people, to making sure that you're practicing leadership on a daily basis.
I like the ad there about you added a leadership moment to something already on your calendar.
Yeah,
getting out about it. Very
love
good.
that. I'm listening. I'm paying attention.
Yeah, last one, number 5, I just said to delegate more. Are you doing too much? That's what I asked this senior leader is, are you doing too much? Are there things other people could be doing? And the big question that we've loved it here for a long time is, are you doing the things that only you can do?
That's right.
Or are you doing a bunch of things that others could do? Because if you're doing so much that you don't have time to lead your people, that's a problem.
Yeah. We're not trying to get you to a point of a leader where you're unloading everything that you're doing and delegating this. To Perry's point, there are certain things that only you can be doing. I want to challenge you. This is a question I'm starting to ask myself more and more, which is, as I go through an activity, a project, something we're working on, asking myself, who on my team or inside our organization would actually enjoy doing this more than I would, or is more qualified to do this than I am? and then reaching out and say, hey, would you be interested in, would you help with this? And more than likely, they're going to say yes, especially if I know it fits into their skill set. Like for you, around writing and studying and learning content or speaking, like you've told me numerous times, hey, listen, you have a busy schedule. If there's an organization that wants you to come do a keynote as a value add, just pick up the phone. Like, I love doing that. I'll go do that, right? And so that is, in essence, delegating, but it's really kind of partnering in a way that everything that's on your plate into something that the other person may enjoy or is better skilled at than you to be able to do that.
And I just, maybe you comment briefly on, I know you've got a great administrative partner now, and I notice a lot of execs, sometimes, the more senior they are, the better they are at this, but early on, it's tough to leverage, appropriately leverage. And I know you're new, Angie's kind of new to the team, and what have you learned about leveraging an administrative partner that helps with this juggling of doing the right things?
That's a great question. So remember, I mentioned just a little bit ago about me spending kind of a day away on the business. So I created this document that was several pages long. That was
the Goaty Manifesto.
Yeah, it could be. It's gonna be I'm going to send it into our publishing company. By the way, if you have a book idea, we have a publishing company. And what I did was I just kind of data dumped onto this document, and then I categorized it, and then I put it by priority. Back to what I was telling you about. Like, okay, so some of the priorities are shift. So I've had to move some things around, and hey, this is a priority, and this is what I was thinking. And so I have this massive document. So she took that document and created it into a kind of a form. And now we're going through and she's saying, okay, when does this need to be completed? Who can help you with this project? What does that look like? How can I take that off your plate? And so she's helping me think through that process. And that has been huge for me to be able to do that. The other thing that she's doing is, she'll every day say, hey, what happened yesterday that I need to be aware of or that I can help you with moving forward? Because then she'll hear me talk about it and she'll be like, don't you think Perry could probably help us do that a little bit quicker than maybe you could, and better, by the way. And so just being able to kind of, she understands the leadership concept of this, and to have somebody can hold me accountable to that.
Yeah, I'm loving that.
Is really helping me. Yeah. Especially when a pile of stuff comes your way. You'll be like,
I just noticed that all the podcast recordings for the rest of the year are all magically on my calendar all of a sudden. That never happens.
Yeah. There are a lot of things that people are like, Goaty, what's going on?
No, but it's important when you're talking about not having time for things, are you appropriately leveraging your administrative partners to hold you accountable? 100%. I love that. So.
Yeah, 100%. Well, as we wrap up, let me come back to the 5 things that Perry brought to us, not the 12. We'll stay with 12. Although, as you do wrap up, I want you to rephrase that quote that you led with, because I think it's just so powerful for us as leaders. But as we wrap up, here's what we talked about. If you want to get to a place to where you have the ability to find time for leadership, if that's really what we're going to stay with, we want to make sure that when you have a busy calendar, you're thinking about a couple of things. Practice calendar blocking and then protect it. Number 2, be clear about what your priorities are. So what gets put on the calendar is in the rank of your priorities. Number 3, schedule your one-on-ones with your team, with your people. Management by walking around is number 4. And then the last one that we just talked about is, how do you delegate more? And not just to delegate. You heard Perry and I talk a little bit, bantering back and forth. It's more than just saying, I have a to-do, so I'm going to give it to dumb.
That's dumping. That's dumping, not delegating.
To dump on somebody else. Right. Yeah. It's much deeper than that.
Yeah, good. Well, thank you for joining. And the quote was that stop trying to add leadership items to your calendar. Make leadership moments of the things that are already on your calendar.
So good.
If you can do that, you're off to a great start. If you want to leave a comment or a question, or if you have an idea for us, we love hearing from you. If you want to get the learner guide from today's lesson, you can do all that at maxwellleadership.com/podcast. We love hearing from you. We're very grateful you'd spend this time with us. That's all today from the Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast.